What's up, guys? So, this is going to be a very different video compared to what I've normally put on this channel. This is going to be kind of religious in a way. I mean, I'm going to be talking about the Bible, I'm going to be talking about history through a biblical worldview. And I understand that not all of you guys would probably agree with that, and that's totally fine. So, if you want to skip this video or whatever, go for it. For those of you that are watching this video, because I am going to be sharing this on Facebook, I've put a lot of thought into what I'm about to say here. I just ask you to try to put yourself in a frame of mind of humbling your current understanding of geopolitics, your current understanding of the Bible, why you believe it to be that way, what kind of influences you may have had that led you that way. Um, because I think what I'm about to uncover here is kind of a literal core issue that might just kind of signify that we could truly be at the beginning of the end. And that's the first time where I think I can actually say that in seriousness. Now, I can be wrong, but of what I'm seeing here in the Bible, of what could be happening here, kind of leads me to everything that I'm about to say. So I'm going to try to detail it out as best as I can. Um, yeah, I mean, this is going to be deep stuff, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. If we kind of shrink me down here a little bit, I'll get myself a little bit bigger. I do highly recommend, whatever your guys' opinions are of this guy, I highly recommend that you watch two videos on his channel. One will be this one, Israel's Panicking at the Mass Awakening. The other would be the entire history of Israel explained. If you only have time for one video, I would highly recommend this one, as it details the entire Middle East conflict with absolutely no biases whatsoever, just historical facts, stuff that's often been hidden or changed through certain lenses in the media, because everything that we have had has been filtered. The truth is, at the end of the day, guys, is yes, while I want us to be, American first and everything like that, I also understand that at the end of the day, this is God's world and we are just living in it. We have to understand everything from both sides, the conflict from both sides. At the end of the day, there's people just like me and you that live in Iran, or they live in Lebanon, or they live in Syria, they live in Egypt. You have these people that live in different countries across the world, and they truly are ordinary people just like you and me. The difference is that we have an extremely filtered lens as we go through life, that makes us have a certain level of arrogance. And as I will get into later, kind of a little bit of a zealousness, which is something that I used to personally struggle with a lot, even up to recently. I think it was June 3rd that I've kind of finally given my life back to God. I just had a big personal realization that night, and I realized all the faults that I've had, all the blind spots that I've had because of my personal ego, my ability to just get manipulated because somebody is saying the thing that I want to hear, which is something that I think we should all be careful of, because that's flattery. And no matter where flattery comes from, it is never a good intention. It is always used against you in the future. You always have to keep your head on a swivel. So I've been extremely humbled over this last month, as I've kind of come to a lot of these understandings. So this video will be extremely important. If you have time, watch this one as well. But pretty much the whole reason why we're here is much of America right now is pro bombing Iran. Me personally, I'm not. I believe that God is judging them, and I believe that if we are not careful in this conflict, that God will judge us also. So I guess I'll first start by going a little bit further in the Bible, and then having to circle back as this is kind of proven at a core level. So the first thing that I want to look at here is Numbers 14. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a backstory of what Numbers 14 is, this was when you had the spies go out to Egypt. I think what it was it 12 were bad and 2 were good, or 10 were bad and 2 were good? Either way, there was 2 good spies, one of them being Joshua, who later led Israel at a later date. But basically, you had these spies that went into the land of Canaan, God's promised land for people, or for his people, flowing with milk and honey and all that. Well, when they went into Canaan and they saw, how big the people were, there were Nephilim back then, which Nephilim were the giants. In Numbers 13, it's detailed as the sons of Anak, which are, some people, because of the way that it's phrased and sounds, and they're like, oh, maybe that's Anunnaki. Either way, it's basically descendants of fallen angels that still lived after the flood. That's why you still have Goliath, who was a descendant of a Nephilim later on in Palestine, in Philistine, in Philistines, because he was a descendant. That blood, those genetics are still there. It's something that Satan had set up, one of the many things that Satan had set up to get us all away from God. So here you basically see the people rebelling. They're like, they're upset about this land. They say, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? So they're basically complaining to God. God's over here trying to give them exactly what he's promised, which is the land of Canaan to become the land of Israel. But the people are totally against it. They're like, there's no way we can go out and meet. They have no faith. Okay, that is the big thing here. They have no faith. And that's probably one of the greatest sins one could ever have, is to have no faith. I think that's actually the original sin, which I'll go over with you guys later. So, they said, let us make a captain, let us return into Egypt. And, Moses and Aaron, the leaders, they get mad, they fall on their face. And then, Josh comes up and he's like, look, the land is good, don't rebel against God. Their defenses departed from them, and the Lord is with us, fear them not. So Joshua here has faith. Moses and Aaron, they have faith. But the people of Israel, the Jews, they do not have faith. That is always this problem that they've had historically, and this is when God comes and starts to judge them. This has happened every single time in the Old Testament in the Bible. You'll notice that you'll go through different historical gaps. I'll just call them gaps, where it could be a generation, it could be a bunch of generations, it could be a couple hundred years. Like, think about it with this Exodus, right, where they had Joseph was the Pharaoh of Egypt, but then 400 years later things were going bad. Now God recognized that his people were getting persecuted, that his people weren't doing anything wrong, at least wrong in his eyes, which is always the most important part to remember here. This is key for later. It is very important to know that God recognizes when his people are being persecuted, and he makes ways to save them, and he also recognizes when his people are doing bad things, and he has to judge them. So you see this cycle in the Bible quite clearly, especially in the Old Testament, which is then later fulfilled through Jesus's coming in the New Testament. So this is what Moses said this is what the Lord said to Moses. He says, "And the Lord said unto Moses, How long will this people provoke me? And how long will it be ere they believe in me for all the signs which I have shewed among them? I will smite them with pestilence. I will disinherit them. I will make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they." Then Moses appealed for his people. He said, "Then the Egyptians will hear it, for thou broughtest up this people in thy might from among them, And they will tell the inhabitants of this land, for they have heard that thou, Lord, art among this people, that thou, Lord, art seen face to face, and that thy cloud standeth over them, and that you goest before them by daytime in a pillar of cloud and pillar of fire by night. Now, if you kill these people as one man, then all the nations which have heard of this fame shall speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land which he sware unto them, therefore he hath slain them in the wilderness. So, basically, Moses was like, look, if you destroy this people, like, he's like, look, I know that they're making you angry. They're making me angry too. But if you destroy this people, then all the rest of the nations of the world aren't going to really truly respect you, because they're going to be like, well, not even God, not even the creator of this universe could get these people to do what he needed them to do. Which, for God, that then turns back in his mind to the Abrahamic covenant that he made. God willingly made this covenant with Abraham, knowing full well that these people, that his descendants, were not going to necessarily be of his same heart. And even he knows, as he's conversing with Moses, Moses' heart is of the Lord. Abraham's heart was of the Lord. The people, their hearts aren't of the Lord, at least not when you see them in the Bible. They have their areas where they go through good stretches, just like anybody else, but they also have core problems. So God, throughout the whole entire Bible, demonstrates his love for his people by basically biting the bullet, knowing that what they're doing is wrong. Even if they're provoking other nations, he knows what they're doing is wrong, and he still loves them through it anyway. That's probably why many nations of the world do hate Israel. They do hate Jews, because God is always bailing them out. See, it's not necessarily that other countries are having these problems. I mean, they do. Sometimes they'll go and they'll do these unprovoked attacks, and it's important to understand and recognize that. But from a biblical lens, the people of Israel, the Jews, they have brought this judgment upon themselves. They have, brought God back into the fold, so to speak, because of their mistakes. God has to bail them out. And, a lot of people can look at that and be like jealous, right? Especially with how it is today. The issue is that when you look at how Jews then operate, because you can see through scripture here what these people truly act like, and you'll see it more as I go on, but also leads to this just core human issue, which is lack of faith, which the Jews they show quite frequently, because they don't even believe Jesus is the Son of God. You have this lack of faith, and then you have greed. So those are two core sins, and that's where I'll go over here for now. Genesis 3. So this was when Satan, as the serpent, tempted Eve into, and Adam for that matter, into eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So he says, For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to her eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave unto her husband, and he did eat. And the eyes of both of them were open. They knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. And then God shows up, right? So what's really the sin here? The sin is twofold. It's two things, which I think you can see through the people of Israel today, the Jewish people as a whole today. The first is lack of faith, because Eve then believed. Eve had more faith in what Satan was saying than what she had been taught through God by Adam, and even maybe conversations that they've personally had with God. So she lost her faith and placed it more into what Satan was saying. The second thing is kind of greed, because what Satan brought up was, your eyes will be open, you shall be gods, knowing good and evil. So the greediness that he introduced with that was like, it was like the second core sin. First was lack of faith, next was greed, because it made God's creation desire more than what God had intended. See, this is very important. I don't think a lot of theologians even really talk about this. I haven't heard many pastors even talk about it at this depth. When you look at the people of Israel and how it mirrors our personal beings, our souls, was lack of faith and greed. We kind of always want a little bit more, right? Where problems always start with the Jews, people of Israel, even with us as people here in America, where problems always start in our lives are where we want more than what God has intended for us. That just allows for so many problems to happen that God frankly doesn't want. But God is gracious and merciful in that he recognized, hey, look, my creation was perfect. They were operating exactly how I intended them to operate before Satan intervened and messed up my creation. Therefore, God is taking it upon himself throughout the Bible to basically try to make up for that flaw. God knows that, yes, since we are now kind of like God's kind of knowing good and evil, that our souls have a responsibility now. But he also recognizes Satan's intervention, and so he gives us an escape, and that is through Jesus. That's why the Abrahamic covenant is so important, but often taken fully out of context. And that's why, the Jews are the way that they are today in the world. It also makes me think of, the reference of the synagogue of Satan in Revelation. It could be, even referring to truly the Jews of today, as I will later show. But yeah, so for now, just think of the two core original sins, which was first and most important, lack of faith. Second is greed. So with that kind of being out in the open now, and maybe you can hopefully see what I'm getting at, basically God's ultimate love is constant bailout of people that he knows did wrong. He knows they did wrong, but he can't destroy them, because then if he does, then it would show the greatest failure on his part as a creator. So it's very weird. I bet this is very strange for anybody to be hearing right now, because I don't think anyone's really talked about it at this level. No one's had this recognition from what I could see online just yet. So with that said, throughout history, the Jewish people in the Bible, and as we know them today, they have always had this problem of, one, a lack of faith in their creator, often moving quickly beyond, like for example, Mount Sinai, okay? Moses quite literally went up to the mountain where they saw whatever God was, like however God came down. They literally saw it. And what was it, like just 40 days maybe? They couldn't go like without creating another idol, because they lost faith in God so fast. In the Old Testament, they've lost faith so fast to where you can understand God's frustration, right? He's like, look, I'm literally right here. Guys, for 2,000 years, we have literally not seen God's presence. And these people did, and they still lost faith. Could you imagine how much that would really frustrate a creator? And then when you look at it today, where people are like, oh, well, we have to defend Israel because through blessing Israel, our nation will be blessed, right? Well, that's taken out of context. Where this exactly was with the Abraham covenant was through his offspring, which was eventually going to be Jesus Christ himself, who then in turn would save the whole world, because God recognized Satan's interference, recognized how God, he couldn't keep the bloodlines pure with the Nephilim, so then you had fallen angels and their spirits now into the mix. You had God's creation basically turned on its head because of Satan. And God does not blame us for that. He blames Satan, but he does have to be fair and just, which is, the punishment of nations here and there as he judges them for not living in accordance to his will. And that's really all it is. It's when you don't live in accordance to his will, it's because typically a greed aspect or a lack of faith. It's one of the two every single time. So with that Abrahamic covenant, it was made so that God could eventually redeem the whole entire world, not just his people. His people were a part of it in the Old Testament. It was Jesus happened because of Abraham. But that said, once Jesus came, he fulfilled all of that and started anew, giving Gentiles or people that were non-Jews the ability to be saved eternally. Okay? The Jews of today, though, one, they don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe he was the Son of God. And two, they are constantly greedy. Today they lack faith, and they lack, or they have greed. Those are those two core sins, right? Which is why I think God is entering into a season of judgment on the people of Israel. And it's why I personally don't think we should have anything to do with what's going on in Iran. I know just recently, as of making this video, supposedly a ceasefire has been announced, but who actually knows how long that's going to last? Because historically, even just in the last decade, how many times have ceasefires been announced but never actually stayed, right? It's always somebody breaks the ceasefire every single time. Whether it's Israel, Iran, or any other nation for that matter, somebody always breaks it. There's never peace. And it's so disappointing. That said, if God is judging Israel because of what they're doing, I think as Americans we should take a step back. This isn't a situation where we should get zealous, keyword zealous, and go in and try to save them from something where we're ultimately being manipulated by. This is almost exactly parallel to Jesus's walk on this planet with how the Jews are operating. So if you guys remember, the Jews, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees, which I'll go ahead and pull up the definitions here. So a Pharisee, a member of an ancient Jewish sect, distinguished as a strict observance of the traditional and written law, and commonly held to have pretensions to superior sanctity. So basically, these Pharisees, this Jewish sect, they believed themselves to be greater than, to be superior to every other nation on earth. They believed that since they're God's people, that they're better than everybody else. But the thing is that if you are a true Christian, you understand that you are not better than anybody else. I am not better than anybody else. If anything, we should humble ourselves that we're even still here because of all the bad that we've done in our lives. That is what Jesus kind of came to show the world, was that he's the only perfect man. We're all not perfect, but his grace is sufficient for us, and that if we believe in him as the Son of God, if we have faith, that is the key thing here. Because if you look at the Bible too, everyone's like, okay, well, all sins can be forgiven. There is one sin of which that can never really be forgiven in a way if you choose to live out your life like this, which is to choose to believe that God doesn't exist. I think it's in John somewhere. It's who is the Antichrist but he who denies the Son. So this opens up another tangent for us to go on real quick. The war on terror, Islam. Okay, I am so bad for this. If you guys are seeing this on my Facebook page, I apologize because I was wrong for so long. Um, I was extremely zealous. There's that word again. I was extremely zealous in my opinion on Islam in the Middle East. So while I still don't personally agree with Islam and its religion, I don't believe in it at all. I still think it is terrible. The way that they treat women, children, the beheadings, the violence, they're bad. Um, but so are the Jews. When you look at them, they're two warring parties. This also goes back to was it Isaac and Ishmael, right? One was chosen, one was kind of kicked out, which it's a sad thing to see. But all these pieces are kind of coming together now. So you have Islam, which is bad, but then you also have these Jews, which are also being objectively bad right now. The Jews are not being persecuted. If anything, they are getting greedy, and God is having to now, consider judgment, which I'm kind of concerned could truly lead into an Armageddon of sorts if everything is not taken care of the way that it should. Like, we've joked about World War III for a while. I've seen stuff over the past couple of years, but I've known in my heart that this isn't realistic. But now where we're at is we could very well see an Armageddon scenario finally play out in real time. But yeah, so these Pharisees, they've believed themselves to be superior. Um, when you look at the Sadducees of the time, so this was a Jewish sect of the party of Jesus that denied the resurrection of the dead, the existence of spirits, and the obligation of oral tradition, emphasizing acceptance of the written law alone. See, the reason why this is so important is because this is exactly how they're not called Sadducees and Pharisees today, but if you look at, say, like the government of Israel, or the way that Jews kind of practice their religion here today, in the U.S. and across the world, it is just like this, just like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Jesus himself called these people a den of vipers or brood of vipers, something like that. And I could be wrong here. This is just my own interpretation here, so this isn't anything that's 100% fact, like I've been saying before. Where I kind of think of is in Revelation, this whole synagogue of Satan idea could be what this modern state of Israel could be, because of all the bad they've chosen to still do. But God, having steadfast love, has to have this endless mercy on them. Otherwise, if he doesn't, that kind of shows a kind of defeat, right? And God is perfect and never loses, and he always finds a way. But our humanity often gets in the way of that. So that said, these kind of modern Pharisees and Sadducees of today are kind of leading the current state of Israel and strong-arming the United States. This is no different than the Jews going after Jesus at the time and having the Romans wind up killing him. If you remember correctly, Pilate never wanted to crucify Jesus. In fact, when the idea was first brought to him, he was like, why? Like, this, he's done nothing wrong. Like, he's not instigating any kind of wars. He's not doing this. He's not doing that. Why should I? And then you had the Jews really pressure and strong arm him to the point where he quite literally washed his hands and said, look, this is on you guys. Like, I'll allow it, but this isn't on me. This is very clearly on you. Because Jesus never actually wanted to make war with the Romans. In fact, the Jews always actually wanted to topple the Romans. In fact, if we go over here, so the zealots of the Bible. Okay, so think of this as, and I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, but think of this as like MAGA today. Make America Great Again, this whole entire movement. While it started, and actually, I shouldn't even say the MAGA movement. That's incorrect. The neoconservative movement, the neocon movement. where, and wow, just like these lifetime realizations are just amazing. When you think of the boomer generation, right? They had just came out of World War II. They were being born. They were basically adults in these in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s, right? Um, and they were and are a very entitled generation in a lot of capacities, right? Because they are the first generation to live right after the U.S. just kind of like mollywopped the rest of the world. And they were able to have the economic benefits of doing so. However, this grew an unhealthy pride in America, which it's, and I got to be careful here, right? Because it is good to be proud of your nationality. I think every person should be proud of where they're at, because in a way that shows appreciation to God of you accepting his will in your life, of where you're at and why. So it's not that I don't think nationalism isn't important. I think it is, but you always have to have God supersede all of that every single time. And what happened here was when Jesus was born, the whole thing was, oh, this Messiah is going to rise, and he's gonna be the King of the Jews, and he's gonna topple everything, like the world as we know it. And in a way, he did, but not in the way that the people of the time thought. Okay, God's ways are always higher than our own. But because of this, this is where the spirit of zealousness kind of reared its ugly head. So, as we know, Peter was a zealot, right? And he was one of the disciples, and Jesus had to put him in his place in more than a few times. One of the biggest things was that the zealots always wanted to be the ones to topple, Rome, right? And Jesus was not here to do that. Jesus was here to simply have a spiritual transformation. He wasn't here to lead a vicious political movement. He was here to basically save the whole entire world. But the Jews, they didn't really care about anybody else. They only cared about themselves. So kind of reading this last paragraph here, because of their often violent tactics, the Zealots have been called some of the world's first terrorists. Though the label is only partially true, not all Zealots were violent. The reputation of Zealots was forceful, aggressive agitators carries a significant lesson for us. Jesus chose Simon the Zealot, a man who likely desired to forcibly remove the Roman government, and he also chose Matthew, a tax collector working for the Roman government. Both Simon and Matthew, though natural enemies, were part of the 12. What a beautiful illustration of the peace Jesus brings. Today, God still brings healing and changes to life, as I hope I'm doing in this video. Those with a violent past or extremist tendencies can be transformed as God uses them to spread the good news of Christ's love for all people. And I mean, maybe that one's personally kind of attached to me, because have I had extremist opinions and stuff throughout the years? I have. I'm not proud of it. I recognize that mistake. I recognize that zealousness, and it's not good. But that's largely where the MAGA movement of today, the neocon movement of today, is. We have all these zealots who are like, let's just go, bomb the heck out of Iran, or bomb the heck out of this country or that country. They're not thinking of what God's will actually is. They're being manipulated by this like zealousness, basically, which is ultimately rooted from a manipulative group of people who see themselves as superior. And when you see yourself as superior, you then try to implement a way where you can manipulate the masses to do your bidding. And the way that they do this in different ways throughout the years is you have a left wing and you have a right wing. The left wing can get away with their violence and it can be justified through their ways, and ultimately it still serves the purpose of these powers that be, these certain ethnicities of people, these Jews, to control everything. Um, but then you have the right wing, which, I mean, I thought for the longest time we weren't the ones that were getting manipulated the way that the left was getting manipulated, and I was so wrong for that because we were getting manipulated from a very zealous, war-hungry, bloodthirsty kind of side. When you step back and you look at the big picture, um, the right wing today are kind of the zealots of what they would have been in the Bible. And that's very disappointing, to kind of come to that realization that our desire ultimately, because, and this is where, people, they get confused and they wind up getting tricked, right? Ultimately, all the zealous people, at their core, they want to be doing what's right for God, right? Think of Peter. As soon as Peter saw that Jesus was getting arrested, what did he do? He went up and he sliced off an ear of one of the Romans. His default was protection. It came out of a good place. But Jesus also told him, he's like, look, no violence. He who like slays by the sword shall be like killed by the sword, or something like that, right? Basically saying like violence isn't the answer, because ultimately that'll be your end too. And I don't think that God today would be pleased by a lot of this call to violence that we have for this other nation, of which we don't even really try to understand. Again, I don't think Iran is good. Far from it. I just don't think this is a problem where we should get involved in and have another endless war for who knows how many years. It's a shame because in 2016, and I used to think Trump was so great. I used to glaze him, right? Like I think a lot of us who are watching this video, we all did, okay, and some of you still do. But he's not the savior, we thought he was going to be. He is human and susceptible to sin, just like every one of us. And it's disappointing to kind of come to that realization. Now, if he changes, cool. I would pray that he changes and kind of does things right. I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, man, it's just some kind of third degree chess move. Like he's playing this angle, he's playing that angle. Like, guys, it's not that complicated. It really isn't. It's not that deep. And if you really take the time to read and understand the Bible, you'll see it. Again, the core issue to kind of tie back here to is greed and lack of faith. So I'm not saying that the U.S. shouldn't exercise its military power. Of course, if we're attacked wrongfully, we should go and fight back. But the simple fact of the matter is we are being manipulated to fight a war that isn't ours through a people who view us as goyim, which is dogs. Now, this is where it's kind of funny too. And this is, I think, where I'm going to move into a more future-paced prediction here of what I see. Muslims and Jews both don't believe Jesus is the Son of God. Muslims and Jews both see people that aren't Muslims and Jews as like dogs and stuff like that. So Muslims believe that we are infidels. Basically, that's their version of saying we're inferior to them, or anybody who isn't one of them is inferior to them. That would also include the Jews. The Jews view everybody that isn't them as goyim, which is dog, essentially cattle. And those two religions constantly go at it in the Middle East because they're both mad at each other because of the whole Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael kind of thing, right? It's sad. It's just like this endless conflict that's just lasted generation upon generation. So I say all that to say that if their common denominator is they both don't believe in the Son of God, right? They do both believe in Jesus. The Jews believe in a Jesus that will be this just political savior. He will come back when he finally comes, when he finally shows up. He will lay waste to the rest of the world, and he will establish his kingdom, and the Jews will rule this kingdom and everything like that along with him. That is their view of the Messiah. They do not believe Jesus was the Messiah as we do. The Muslims also don't believe Jesus was the Messiah. They believe Jesus was just another prophet. And that's pretty important, because when you look at the Bible in Revelation, it's talking about this figure that we know as the Antichrist that is going to come and deceive the whole world into thinking that he is their savior. And how else would you convince two peoples to get together and make peace, or temporary peace, as we know, because in the Bible it's 3.5 years of peace and then 3.5 years of the worst turmoil? The only way is through a Jesus returning that fits the bill for both Jews and Muslims. I think that's what we're about to see here, guys, in live time. We are going to see a figure pop up that is going to say that he was Jesus. He's going to affirm that he was not the Son of God. And he is going to, because here too, in Islamic eschatology, the Muslims believe that Jesus will also return in the end times. They do. They believe in Jesus, not the true Jesus, but they believe that their version of Jesus, who also didn't die on the cross, he was actually saved like last minute, and somebody else, some poor soul, took his place. Like, that's truly what they believe. It's kind of weird. It has no historical basis, but that's what they believe. So you'll see this Jesus figure, according to Islam, come down. He will be carrying the wings of two angels that bring him down. He will assert that he is not the Son of God and that Muhammad is greater than he. Now the Jews, they will see this Jesus and they will see it as their Messiah, and that is how the Antichrist that we know in the Bible, in the New Testament, in Revelation, is going to come about. And then that's when I think we all really need to get concerned, and where we should probably get our hearts right now. Because I think that's the reality of what we'll see. Christianity is going to be wholly disregarded. It's going to be, Jews or Muslims. I hope that Christianity isn't fully disregarded, in that we do have to remember the Bible is a Middle Eastern centric book. That means everything written in the Bible is from a Middle Easterner's perspective. Even when John wrote Revelation, he was writing it from his perspective of where he was at in the Roman Empire of the time. Like, even though he was on the island of Patmos, exiled, they were under Roman control. This was all still around the same time. Granted, it was after the fact, but this was still very close in time to Jesus being crucified and everything like that. The veil being torn, everything, right? So, yeah, I think where we should focus more on is not this just blind violence, this zealousness that we can have, that the MAGA group has, the neoconservative movement has. We should not focus on that, because ultimately that is us being manipulated by these Jewish powers that are trying to victimize themselves so that they can go on and do whatever they want with their greed without question. And obviously, God recognizes that, and that's where God enters into a period of judgment because they are not happy with what they have given them. Think about it. In 1948, which you'll see this in the this video right here, in 48, they were given the land of Israel to themselves, right? And you can view that as God giving them and honoring that promise he made of bringing them back to their homeland. That is perfectly okay. However, the Jews that started leading that country were like, well, we're not gonna feel comfortable until all of our neighbors are like obliterated, basically. So then that's where you have Western media, which is constantly strong-armed by these Jews. Just look up the ownership of all these media companies, okay? Which, I mean, shoot, take this, right? So this is Goyim, right? This is explaining what it actually is. Now, one of the very first freaking things you'll see is this Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, AJC, right? Translate hate. All this stuff to basically hide their true motives. Their true motives. They know how to be sneaky. Okay, this isn't me being anti-Semitic. This is me recognizing the same problem that God himself recognizes. And I say that passionately because I've been blinded for so long. We all have. But anyway, like I kind of lost my train of thought for the first time. Give me a second. I'll pause it real quick. Right, so you had this beginning of Israel where God brought them back to their land. It wasn't enough. Because they were like, oh, we're not going to feel safe because of our neighbors. Which brings us back to Numbers 14, where the people of Israel did not have faith that God was going to protect them and make a path for them. This is where it all goes full circle. And I hope you guys can see it. I know it's been a longer video. If you've watched it all the way, I really do appreciate it. But it's important to look at this from a biblical worldview, historical, also just from God's perspective. If you read the Bible long enough, you will start to understand God. And that's a very good place to be. I know for me, I started reading the Bible pretty much every day. I've not been perfect with it, but pretty much every day for basically since November of 2017. I think late November of 2017. And so I think because I've stayed with that holy habit of reading every night, I've been able to grow as a person and grow in my relationship with God to make sure that I'm living in a way that he wants me to. And I've had my moments where I've been thinking I'm doing the right thing, but I'm actually doing the wrong thing. I've recognized a lot of that, so I'm actively making changes in my life for that. And all I can do is simply implore to all of you watching this video to just reconsider what exactly is going on here. Ask questions. Why are we going and starting or potentially starting another war for a people that have caused nothing but problems for the rest of the world, but God himself, even making God himself frustrated to the point of wanting to destroy them, and God himself having to be kind of talked off a ledge by his own creation because of what everything would mean if he does something like that. It is truly fascinating. Again, I don't think anybody else has kind of made this connection online yet. But one thing I want to leave you guys, or two things I want to leave you guys with, is I think over here, so the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Please keep that in mind. I implore you to please keep that in mind. I understand that I'm not perfect. I understand I've made a lot of mistakes. I truly have. But when you can understand and humble yourself to see that maybe we did all have it wrong, you will be extreme. I'm getting goosebumps just kind of saying this, because I know how many people are going to probably watch this video and be like, what happened to him? What happened is I've given my life back to God. And I see him, I understand him, I love him. I understand how much he loves me. And all I want to do is share the good news with those around me. Lastly, play this song by Dax. It's called Eternity. I think you guys will really enjoy it, so I'll shrink myself down a little bit more and we'll play this song.
And when you really examine the concept of eternity, one will find that there is no end. Life after death is a concept humans still don't understand.
How long is eternity? I don't understand. Some say forever, but if it's forever, then when does it come to an end? It's more than a concept, an infinite time that we spend. It confirms that our lives here on earth are a blip of existence and don't make a dent. As we get older, it creeps in our mind, the thought of the end and beginning of time. The life that we thought that we lived doesn't matter, approaching the thought that someday we all die. I get confused when I look in the sky. What is this water hitting my eyes? Maybe the rain is the pain and shame that hits earth when God cries. As we get older, we don't care what we did. It's not the things we receive, but the things we give. We try to go back to the time we were kids, but those shoes no longer fit. And then we finally realize that everyone dies, but not everyone lives. So I'm taking a chance. I'm living my life in the moment and not in a future that's not in my hands. I'm giving my time to the people who love me for everything that I am. I'm living my life in reality, not for a post that they'll tap when they open the gram. I'm doing whatever it takes. I'm not gonna dwell on my past mistakes. I'm bridging the gap between my dreams and what I see while I'm awake. They say leave it up to fate. Well, fate favors those who take. Cause if eternity's forever and all this is temporary, why wait? Humanity's lost. We obsess the price of material things, but at what cost? Then treat time like currency and spend it for applause, because we think that life is just a game we can turn on and off. We build, we break, renew, replace. We 9 to 5 and count the days for 40 years till 65, then live off what our pension pays. We fall in line as mental slaves. Our bodies work, our minds are caged. And that's why people say the richest place you'll find is at the graves, full of hopes and dreams that people never chased, full of feelings that we felt but never got to say. All the thoughts inside our heads that we kept stored and locked away. As our age increased and we got old and everything decayed, and we finally realized that our whole lives was not a game, and that time was a commodity that we could not regain, and that we were in control and there was no one else to blame. Is the day that we change. It's eternity, no way. Eternity, no way. It's eternity, no way. Eternity, no way. It's eternity, no way. It's eternity, no way. It's eternity, no way. Eternity, no way.
What are you doing with your time? What is your definition of happiness? Are you giving more than you're taking? And finally, if it were to all end right now, what are you holding on to that you need to let the world see?
So lastly, I'll just say this. God bless you all.